Hello everyone, I'm Bruffy1322 and welcome to the Stewards room, where we'll be taking a look at racing incidents submitted by you guys and trying to make a determination on who, if anyone, was at fault. There's a link in the description to submit your own clips, and feel free to check out the playlist link for more of these videos, specifically the first, which acts as a scene setter. Also, keep an eye out for cards popping up on screen towards the end of each segment where you can vote on who you thought was at fault for each incident. So our 4 clips today are all to do with incidents on a straight. So what happens when people move over on a straight? What can you do? What can't you do when you're moving on a straight? We've talked a little bit about this in a previous episode, but we're going to focus specifically on a very specific part of it for this episode because we've got a lot of clips that are basically exactly the same thing. So as you can see here, they come together on the middle of the straight, and we're going to first of all go straight to the document that we look at every single week to find out a bit of background on the rules before we make a determination on this, and that will help us for the rest of the clips as well. So here we are, back to the rules of racing document that we always use. This is always linked in the description as well. And the specific part that we're going to be using for this episode is part 3, racing alongside another car, which basically says when one driver is completely ahead of another on a straight, either can move with impunity within the width of the track. But things change when there's any overlap between the cars, because lateral movement could cause a collision. If 2 cars have any parts alongside one another, each driver must respect the space occupied by the other car. It doesn't matter who's ahead nor how far ahead they are, they may not initiate a move into the other car. Both drivers have the right to continue driving in a straight line unimpeded. And it says this is stated under Spawning Regulation 20.4, where it says any driver defending his position on a straight and before any braking area may use the full width of the track during his first move, provided there's no significant portion of the car attempting to pass is alongside his. For the avoidance of doubt, if any part of the front wing of the car attempting to pass is alongside the rear wheel of the car in front, this will deem to be a significant portion. So back to the clip, and let's slow it down as well. Now, as we just saw in the rule book, if any part of the car is alongside yours, you are not allowed to move over and occupy the space where the car is. So here, as you can see, the black car is pretty much parallel. Let me just get this. So you can see that the black car is parallel to the white line. That is a terrible line, but you get the idea. And what we've got is this yellow car over here moving over to the right. Now, if the yellow car is completely ahead of the black car, then he is allowed to move in front of the black car. If there's no part of the black car that's in front of the yellow, alongside the yellow, he's going to be okay. But obviously that doesn't happen, and the proof of that is the fact that they make contact. So if you look at the black car, he constantly stays parallel to this line on the right. So he's not making any deviation of movement across the track. He's staying straight, following the track as it is. It's the yellow car that's making the movement, and as you can see, he moves over to the right, he moves over to the right. If he stops there, he's okay, but it's very easy to tell who's at fault for this, because if he's completely in front, then no contact will happen. If he's not completely in front, then contact is going to happen, and that will be his fault. So we just saw it from the rule book as well, obviously. So he continues moving, they touch, and that is proof right there that the yellow car was not completely in front of the black car. The black car had a portion of its car alongside the yellow car, and as we just saw from the rules, you're not allowed to move and then occupy that space that the black car is in. But that's exactly what happens. He moves over, and that is completely the yellow car's fault for moving over into a space that wasn't there, basically. We can also see it from this perspective as well, and it pretty much shows exactly the same thing. It's obviously marginal. He's not, it's just a mistake. You can't exactly put this down to malice. He's just trying to follow the slipstream of the car in front. But there was a car occupying the space that he was trying to move into, and that is entirely down to the yellow car to take the blame for that, because he moved into a space that basically wasn't a space. But of course, feel free to vote. There should be a poll popping up in the card in the top right hand corner of the screen. You'll be able to use that to vote on who you thought was at fault for this incident, and that will be the same for all the incidents for this episode. So our second clip is pretty much the same thing as all the clips will be for this week. We see a three-way battle for the lead, and second place gets a better run, goes for an overtake on the right hand side of first place. They have it coming together, and again, it's quite good when we look at the rules so specifically as we've done before that, because it's probably very easy to see who's at fault for these incidents at this point. So as you can see, the orange car is coming up on this corner, gets a better run around the corner and goes to the outside here. And then at that point, first place guy is not allowed to take that space. He's not allowed to move over, and it is entirely his fault, the crash that happened there. So we've slowed it down, and it's actually a good move. You know, he realizes he's got the run coming around that corner and moves to the outside, which is going to turn into the inside for the next corner. So he's basically setting himself up for the next corner. But at this point, the orange car has part of his car in front of, at least alongside part of the blue car, and that is the defining characteristic. If there's any part of your car in front or alongside any part of the defending car is not allowed to move over on you. You're obviously also not allowed to move over on them. This works both ways. Two cars going along a straight, they have to stay in those same positions. They're not allowed to move into the other person's space if there's any part of either of the cars alongside each other. So the orange car, and again, like I said in the first clip, it's easy to tell that there was some part of the car alongside because contact wouldn't happen if there wasn't. So the blue car moves over, which he's not entitled to do, hits the orange car, obviously sends the orange car completely out into a spin, and it's pretty obvious that that's entirely the blue car's fault because he wasn't allowed to move over like that once the orange car had gotten some portion of his car ahead. So again, the poll is in the top right. It will pop up in a card, but yeah, based on what we've seen from the rules themselves, I can't imagine there's too much controversy with regards to the results for these polls. So third clip, and it's the same sort of thing, but there's a little bit of argy-bargy that goes on beforehand. Supposedly this was a race in obviously big bulky contenders on a rallycross track. They're fighting over third place here. And again, they're on the straight, but that move that we just saw there is what causes such a big crash. So they are having, a little bit of argy-bargy initially. We've got third place that basically runs a little bit too wide, hits that, and in reality at that point, third place should have, the black contender should have given up the place to the blue contender because essentially he made him crash at that point. But we're not looking at that incident in particular. What we're interested in is this next incident here. So they're both level at this point. Now, this first move there, that's fine. If it had stayed like this, everything would have been fine. But it's the second move that the blue, green, turquoise, whatever you want to call it, contender does over here, which he's not allowed to do. Obviously, you can see that there's a massive amount of space being occupied. And I'll tell you what, we'll slow it down before we start playing it again. Well, I guess we won't, but let's scroll it back. So, yeah, especially in a rallycross race, you expect some contact, but still the rules do apply, and the angle that this blue contender is going at this point isn't the way that he should be going for the track. He's pointing the car to hit that wall, basically. So of course there was going to be a collision here unless he veers off to the right and corrects for it, but he doesn't do that. So yeah, it's inevitable. He tries to be fair. It looks like he's starting to turn to the right. So again, I think like the first incident, this is probably not intentional. Just the second incident was intentional, clearly. But I think this was just one of those, especially with GTA, with the crash enhancer physics and all that kind of stuff, just one of those things that happen. It comes together. But it obviously is the blue contender that's at fault for the ensuing crash. obviously, like I said, poll in the top right, you can vote on who you thought was at fault. Blue contender or black contender. Or was it just a racing incident? Just one of those things that you wouldn't really put to blame on anybody. And our final clip for today is also on GTA. We're in a multi-class race, at least that's what the background said for this. There's standard multi-class rules, which basically mean that the slower cars do not have to get out of the way of the faster cars, but they're also not allowed to actively defend their position. So this is where the main point of contention happens. Now, it was said in the notes that it was realised that the yellow bullet at this point, was too late in the braking going into the chicane. So this incident isn't something that we're looking at. This has already been deemed to be the yellow bullet's fault for, braking way too late and later than he needed to, and that's fair enough. I think that's reasonable. I will just play it on again to also make a point that retaliation should never be accepted and is never allowed in a race. Obviously, you can see that the entity wasn't very happy and comes around the next lap and or in a few laps' time and knocks him off. That would definitely be a penalty for that one as well, regardless of any penalties that were due for the yellow bullet for what he did. I would also be giving probably an even harsher penalty for the entity for that. But anyway, none of that is what we're specifically looking at. The specific incident that we're looking at here is the squeeze towards the wall at this point. Now, the bullet is allowed to take his normal racing line, and that's standard multi-class rules. The slower cars essentially, this is the same in World Endurance Championship, at Le Mans, anything like that. When you have two different classes of cars, or even three, the slower cars, the general consensus is the slower cars should stick to their line, and it's up to the faster cars to then find their way around them. There's no blue flags like there are in Formula 1 or anything like that. Part of the skill of a multi-class race is finding your way around slower cars if you're in a quicker car. So the bullet is perfectly allowed to take his line to the right here because, as we saw, racing lines, you go out wide, you cut in for the chicane to go out that way. So that is not out of the ordinary what the bullet did there. And to be fair, he left enough space, Even if he hadn't left enough space, the entity has to be aware of the fact that he's the quicker car, he's the one that can see everything. The bullet can't see where the entity is going, so it wasn't really a smart decision for the entity to go on the outside here when that's where the racing line is, and the natural tendency of the slower cars or any car is to go wide here on the bridge. So to be fair to the bullet, it did actually leave enough space for them to both get through, but there was nothing wrong with the bullet going even further wide there. And if he had gone further wide and there'd been contact there with the bullet and the entity, that would have been entirely on the entity's fault. It was the entity's job to get around the bullet safely, not the other way around, because the bullet was just following his racing line and doing what he should do. So really the entity should have just gone to the inside at this point, knowing that the bullet, or should have realised that the bullet was going to go out wide, because that's just that's the racing line for the track for the corner. But he tries to go around the outside to basically probably keep his racing line for himself as well, but he's not, you've also got to take into account closing distances with this as well, closing speeds I should say. So for the credit to the yellow bullet, he does actually move over to the left when he realizes the entity is coming through, but because of the closing speed, that could have easily not have happened if he just didn't see him in time. So yeah, there's not really, this is the incident that was specifically asked about, not any of the other stuff. There was not really an incident at all there, to be honest, for me. I'm going to put the poll in the top right as always, but for me, that's just racing, that's not even an incident. It's pretty much a racing incident if you were, you're not putting blame on either of them, because nothing really happened. And if there was any blame to give, if an incident did happen in that situation, it would be on the entity because he's got the duty to safely navigate around the slower cars, not the other way around. And it's not as if the slower car, the Bullet, was doing anything out of the ordinary. But for me, this was just a nothing incident, to be honest. So that's pretty much it for this episode. Let me know your thoughts down below and in the polls on the video itself. You can find in the video description all the info and links that you may need to submit your own clips. And if you'd like to support me, you can do so on Patreon by becoming a YouTube member or simply subscribing and liking the video. Thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.